Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming this morning. For me this is quite an early start to be ready up and at 'em, so I hope, I hope that what I have to say is worth getting up really early this morning. So thanks for the intro as well, Richard. And you did actually steal my opening line, and that was the mission of the business, which is fine. I didn't see your script prior, so that's all good. But yeah, so we are LükBook, and our mission is to revolutionise 14 plus fashion. And as Richard said, it really is about making it unapologetically aspirational, completely attainable, and easily accessible. And that really speaks to our core values at LükBook as well, which is diversity, inclusion, and accessibility. And that's sort of how we've tried to embody every decision that we make in terms of how we run LükBook. So the real genesis for LükBook and why we started was the lived experience of my business partner and I. So basically, since I was 13, I was basically the size that I am today. So I was always very, very tall, and I mean, as you can try and imagine, as a 13-year-old child in this body, trying to go shopping for kids' clothes is an absolute nightmare. And it got even worse when I was, in adulthood. My body size, shape, and weight has fluctuated my entire life. So yes, I'm in this body now, but I've certainly been a bigger size, I've been a smaller size, and it changes all the time. And especially when I was in a bigger body, it was an absolute nightmare to go shopping. Like, I just remember, if you can try and imagine and put yourself in a bigger body's shoes, like running around your local Westfield, countless trying to like fit jeans that don't fit over your juicy thighs or your big bum, or even just trying to show up in the corporate world where you're trying to try on a blazer and it just doesn't go over your broad shoulders. And that has been the lived experience. So moving on from that picture that I've painted in terms of the real frustration, anxiety, and sweat-induced shopping experiences. So that's not just the experience of my business partner and I, but 66% of Australian women, which is, okay, thank you, which is of course then the mass market. So it's certainly not a cute little niche, which I am constantly being told by VC investors. And it is a domestic market that's worth $6 billion. And as you can see, 300 billion if you expand that out globally. And of course, as I'm sure you're all aware, you cannot build a business based on merely two people's lived experience. And so for the first 6 months of us developing LükBook, we really made a concerted effort to understand the lived experience of other women. So we spoke to and observed around 2,000 women in terms of their shopping experiences and what their real pain points were when they were trying to go and shop, not only online, but also in bricks and mortar spaces. And as you can see from the stats on the board, it's quite clear that women are feeling very underwhelmed in terms of the shopping options that exist for them, and really underserved. So it's a market that really needs to be honed in on. So based on that customer validation and that lengthy process of research that we did, that's how we then came up with our business model and what is LükBook today. So it's based on 3 core pillars, the first being fit. So we are in the process of developing out a proprietary fit technology so that we can make meaningful fit recommendations for women when they're shopping online, because that is really one of the key barriers to women shopping online. And also, for context, in the plus market, there aren't many bricks and mortar options, and so that then creates an even further barrier for you to be able to try on the garments that you're buying online. And then of course fashion, so we're curating the best 14 plus fashion designers here in Australia, which is absolutely fantastic that we've been able to source these amazing designers. And then family, and that really came out of our research as well, is that a lot of this market do feel quite isolated and not really part of a community that they are represented in. So really fostering that community and family environment. So moving on then to after launching LükBook and the model that it is today, I am pleased to say that we have been successful in closing out our seed round, and now we're looking so in the form of safe notes, debt finance, and some grants as well. But at the moment, we're looking to raise again after this close. In terms of the brands that we have, so we've been successful in signing on 21 brands, and we've got a couple that are actually onboarding this week as well. So it's continuously developing, and I guess for context, in terms of that growth from 0 to 21, we have only launched the business last February, so we haven't even been operating for a full year yet. In terms of some key growth metrics, which I know we all love some sexy numbers, so we've had, as I've sort of alluded to, 200% growth in brands that we've signed on. We've reached over 2 million women across all of our social platforms, and actually I think that number is slightly higher now as well. We've had 60% month-on-month growth in our sales, and our returns rate is as low as 10%. And for context, in terms of people that don't or not familiar with the e-com landscape, the average return rate in the industry is about 30%. So that's really where the cost is exorbitant for a lot of e-com brands. So that's, if you can drive that number as low as possible, then, well, one, you've done your job because the customer's happy with the fit of the garment, but also it obviously drives down your costs of operations of the business. So in terms of being able to, some of the things that have really contributed to achieving that growth is our success in getting national media coverage. And that has really been an effort of reaching out to our networks, but also in my prior career. Towards the end of my career, I specialised in media, tech and entertainment clients. So a lot of these media outlets were my previous clients as well. So it was really leveraging the connections that we had there as well. And I think something that is really important to highlight is that we are a mission-based business. So as much as we can say that what we're doing is maybe not a political agenda or trying to create a shift in the narrative in terms of the fashion landscape in Australia, it really is. And the reason I had these two images is because that really speaks to that messaging. So this message here, so that's my business partner, and that is just a quote from her in a podcast that we were featured in. And we put that as a grid tile post on our Instagram, and that more, although we're a fashion brand, that more political messaging far outperformed any of our fashion, beautiful, gorgeous content that we had, and the engagement that we had in starting that conversation was astronomical, and I think that's really telling in terms of the landscape of today, showing your authenticity behind the brand that you are running, and people really want to see who is running the brand. And I think that's also part of our competitive advantage, is that my business partner and I are part of the target market, and if you look at some of the market leaders, certainly at a board level, you would be able to see that the majority of the people on those boards, and no disrespect, but are all white men in suits, and maybe there is one token female who is straight size and not plus size themselves. So if they're the people making those decisions and trying to serve a market and not really intimately understanding that, I think that that's where our competitive advantage really falls. And then in terms of the second photograph, that for me is one of our proud moments that we've achieved in the year, and this is a group of women who are the key plus size influencers in Australia. And so we then sponsored an event for them, and they are all wearing garments that you can buy on LükBook. So that was just, a nice little, imagery of I guess us really embodying our mission and our vision and our purpose in real life. So now moving on to our team. So of course there's myself and my co-founder who lead LükBook. We have Sophie, who is our marketing lead, and she's actually based here in Newcastle as well. And aside from her being our marketing lead, she's also one of the lead plus size influencers in Australia. So that was a really strategic hire for us in terms of being able to tap into that influencer market, because that in itself is a really difficult space to enter if you're not part of that network, I guess. We also have Charmaine, who is our support in terms of just the business ops and day-to-day runnings of the business. And then we have two very amazing advisors. So we're very fortunate to have Richard Suleiman, who is a global branding expert. And he was really instrumental in terms of us building out the brand of LükBook and in terms of how we effectively communicate and connect with our end consumer. And then we have James Henderson, who is a keynote speaker not only on e-commerce, but specifically on marketplaces. And obviously that's basically the business model that we run today. So he's been absolutely instrumental in terms of also us understanding the key performance marketing metrics behind the business that we're building. And of course, I've painted a very rosy picture, but it's not all sunshine and roses. And I think that that's really important for us to speak about as well in the startup ecosystem, and sometimes that gets lost. So the middle picture, and I just want to talk you through some of these, and they're a bit funny. I mean, there are certainly way worse things that we've gone through in this year, but I think these are like the funny highlights. So the middle photograph is my business partner and I, and we are literally napping in a public space between meeting with VC investors, because you have to be completely on when you are presenting. So we would take advantage of anywhere we could nap just so we would be 100% energetic. So I think that's quite funny. And that was actually one of our team members made that little caption. I thought it was really funny. And I guess also that really, I guess the visual imagery there is to also represent that we work really, really hard and we're really dedicated to achieving the mission that we are set out to achieve. The photograph here with us throwing up the peace signs is us taking a Zoom meeting while sitting in a gutter in Sydney, and everyone walking past being like, what are these people in suits doing sitting on a gutter having a meeting? And that was also because we were between meetings and had no space, so that's that. And then the far right photograph, or I guess my left, your right, is just a photograph of a very messy boot when we are running our editorial shoots and how manic it can actually get. So thank you all for listening. I hope that was semi-entertaining and informative, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions. Yes, I can. I'm just going to take this off.
It's always enlightening to hear, we always hear the good stuff, but it's always enlightening to hear about the not so good stuff, the harder stuff, because everyone's journey is different. Every founder takes a completely different path to everybody else. They also have very different road humps they have to get over. So sharing some of those was great. Maybe in the question Q&A, we can get into some others.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you again for that. That was awesome. You did mention something. I want to dig into that a little bit with one of these questions. You mentioned that there's not that many brick and mortar stores for anyone who's shopping for plus size garments. And that you're looking at building a tool, some sort of tech tool. So we have a question here that's asked, isn't it hard for customers to find the right fit online? What specific IT platforms or programs does LükBook use to assist women of various sizes to find the perfect fit? Can you hint at it?
Yeah, sure. So I think that is one of the, and also speaking to, I guess, a challenge that we're facing is we do have quite a low fidelity MVP version of that fit tech. And that's just a basic Shopify integration. And it's called Kiwi Fit. So essentially that's taking the data point measurements of the garments from the designers and then asking the consumer also to then put in their data measurement points to then make, it's just a basic data matching process. But we are in the process of building out a database to actually capture that data because it's hard to build that, and in terms of like the actual go-to-market in terms of capturing that data, and especially the nuance in terms of how you communicate with this customer base and the willingness to part with that really intimate information is quite difficult. So part of our strategy this year is to first start with pop-ups. So and this is speaking to, I guess, the bricks and mortar option for women to come to. So to have a pop-up where you can not only try on the clothes, but we can have a more educational conversation with the end consumer as well, and build that real rapport and trust with the brand to then make them more comfortable to share that information. And also like intimate fittings in terms of, getting a stylist that might be able to help them, but then also capturing that data, because as everyone can probably appreciate, you're not going to want to put all of this information into a random site that you know nothing about.
And that leads us right into James, who's the co-founder of Half and Half, questions. You kind of scratch the surface on it, because it's easy enough to get a response when crowdsourcing sizing options. So I'm imagining from what you've said that you'll be at maybe malls or public spaces to engage with people to sort of in situ grab their data and talk to them and educate them.
Yeah, correct. So like Westfield Centre Group have reached out to us, so I think that might be our first go-to to do pop-ups in different areas as well, to really understand where our concentrated customer base is. And through that, so it'll be a pop-up, we'll have, our team on the floor, we'll have garments. I mean, we may even only have not our full range, because that's going to take up a lot of space, but even just like one size in each garment. And then the sale will still go through our website. And then like all of our designers express ship, so it'll be on your doorstep in the next 2 days. And I guess once you've been able to do that purchase, you know what size you are in that brand. And a lot of them just do different patterns and styling in the same sort of cut, so that's really helpful as well. So that's, I guess, in terms of the floor space, but in terms of the data collection, it is about that intimate educational piece. And I think that's also our advantage, is that my business partner, her technical training is in psychology. So that's been really instrumental in terms of knowing how to create that comfortable space for these women to come and share information as well.
Perfect. It's interesting. It's actually cool that you're an e-com platform, so you think it's all digital, but no, there's actually real life installations. You can create experiences. Yeah,
and I think that the reason that we've now decided to go down that path as well is because that is the unequivocal feedback that we're getting. And that really comes down to that design thinking methodology in terms of refining the solution that you put out in the market and really like listening to your end consumer.
Totally.
And so that's the genesis of why we would go down the route of the pop-ups. And then once we really understand where our concentrated customer base is, we will then set up potentially a more permanent physical store and have that as really, well, our vision is to have it as a really experiential shop front. So not just a standard store that you're going to walk in, but one that you want to be in. So there's going to be like the glitz, the glam, the vibe, and I guess creating that space that when you walk past, even as a straight-sized person, you want to go in and then you realise, oh, actually, they don't stock my size, which I think has never happened to me as a plus consumer. Like, I've just never had that experience. So I think that would be really interesting. Like, and that's us trying to like flip the narrative on its head, because we are serving the majority of Australian women. So why do the majority of Australian women why can't they have that experience? Like, I don't want to go to a daggy mumsy shop that like has nothing I want to buy. And so it's really creating that envious space that you want to be in and then scaling it from there.
I don't know if you've seen the example of when you're creating a business or a startup, you're building the car or the skateboard on the way. You sort of build the car, you sort of start with a skateboard and a couple of wheels and some handlebars. You're kind of doing that in a way for a brick and mortar retail store. You're potentially starting e-com and then getting more and more data, more and more insights, understanding more and more about your customer, and then building what they want. And if that happens to be a physical location, then so be it.
Yeah, and I think that's really going to be the way that we can connect. And I mean, some of the examples, there are a couple of plus size brands that have done it quite well. So there is actually one here, well, they do from 6 to 24, just here in Newcastle, called Fate, and they're amazing. And that it's almost a destination store, because plus size consumers just don't have this place to go. So people will travel to go to this destination store. There's another one in Brisbane called Proud Poppy, which is not my aesthetic. It's hyper feminine, but that's, I mean, each to their own. But people travel there. They fly with their girlfriends for a weekend to Brisbane because that's the only shop that they can shop at. So that's what we want to, I guess that's what we're striving for, but to have more variety of aesthetics and not just one sort of aesthetic. Yeah.
Jean-Louise Olivier from the uni has asked...
That's my sister. Jean-Louise Olivier.
Your sister has asked, what inspired you?
I feel like I always have a posse of a following.
What inspired you to be a founder of a startup, and what previous experience helped you on your journey?
Yeah. So yeah, what inspired me to want to start my own business? That is, well, certainly my mother, and she's also here. I feel like that was a really loaded and intended question. But you know, so my mother was a serial entrepreneur, and I always looked up to her, and I really learned a lot in terms of how she's run her businesses. And I mean, my mother always jokes that I was born in a blazer, and I think that is very true. If you look at what I've done to date, I've really tried, initially climbed up the corporate ladder, but I've always wanted to run my own business. And yeah, so I think she's definitely the main inspiration and probably the reason why I wanted to start my own business, because I could see that she could successfully do that. And then in terms of the core things that I've leveraged from my past career and learnings and education, I was very privileged to go to a school that had was really tech enabled and I guess quite advanced for the time. I mean, now most schools are tech enabled, but we were sort of the first cohort that went through that for year 11 and 12 we only had laptops and no textbooks. And I'm always an opportunist. And so when they offered to study like IPT, so just basically IT processes and that really high level understanding across all things tech. And so I was like, this is the way of the future. I need to study that. And I was the only girl in the class, and I was obviously doing my nerdy thing. Ended up coming first in that whole cohort, which I know that's quite big-headed to say, but I was like, I'll show you, I know how to do this tech thing. But that was like really instrumental in terms of like the tech side of the business. That's sort of what I oversee as well. And that, yeah, it was instrumental in terms of understanding all of the back-end side of how all the data works and integrates together. And then I sort of built on that, and so I was a financial auditor, but then also because I had that training just at a school level, and nobody else, I guess, in that cohort of students that came through starting at their careers had that tech side. I was the lead in the PwC Newcastle office looking at the IT general controls audits. So then I was able to see across all different scales of businesses in terms of how their IT infrastructure works. And then in terms of the financial side of auditing, also understanding not only like the finances of the business, but you get a real scope across the entire realm of the different pillars of business operations. And again, different, like, so I had like not-for-profits, I had small to mediums, I had ASX listed. And so that 10-year career that I had at PwC was really instrumental in terms of how I was able to also understand how to run LükBook, but scale it as quickly as it has within a year, I think.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. You got the full gamut view, plus you had these early experiences that you snowballed the skills into.
Yeah, and if I was speaking to like a room of students, I'd be like, do IT studies, be that nerd in the corner. Like, it is so, yeah, it's really important. So
yeah, obviously critical and pivotal for you. That's
yeah.
Awesome. I don't mean to butcher your name, so I'm sorry. Sarah Prow from Sarah Prow Harp has asked, why is inclusivity and accessibility in the fashion world so important to LükBook?
Oh, that's the whole reason we started. Well, I mean, it's, I guess if you think of, and I'm probably not telling you anything you don't all already know, but the fashion landscape is very exclusionary and really targeted at what we call straight size, so size 6 to maybe 12 or 14. And that really has been also the narrative of what it means to be beautiful and the idealistic body type and shape. And I think also once you start to go above a size 14, the homogeneity in terms of the body sizes and shapes, there is no homogeneity. And so then what is the epitome of being beautiful? And in terms of my deck that I've gone through, all of those images that you've seen of these beautiful women are from our in-house editorial shoots. So that's us also like being able to embody the purpose that we set out to achieve in terms of making women feel absolutely amazing no matter how they look and feel, and that should be the case. And like in terms of our stance on bodies at LükBook, you know, there's obviously the body positivity movement and then people who are on the other spectrum of that, but we're sort of tried to take it a step further and think about putting our voice in terms of body neutrality. So why do we even need to have a conversation about bodies? Why is the first thing that when you see somebody like commenting on how they look or what size they are, or why is it a constant, when you gather with your friends and family, constant conversation about dieting, for example? So I guess it's really making it inclusive for everybody to participate in society and feel powerful and beautiful in the way that they are.
Yeah, in their everyday lives, yeah.
And that speaks to our tagline, is just come as you are. That like you should just be able to turn up in the world and be accepted.
Sure.
Yeah.
Monique from the University of Newcastle has asked, and you did mention that your mum has been a huge player in your life, but is there anyone else, and think to maybe the 3 pictures you showed before when things were hard, or another time when things were very difficult, was there any person or thing or message that kept you going in those harder times?
Yeah, I mean, it would be difficult to say one. I think that certainly Richard Suerman, one of our advisors, he was there from the start of setting up LükBook, and he's not only like helped us with the branding and the more, I guess, technical elements of running the business, but he has been a mentor to myself. And so I was living in Sydney just before moving back here, and we lived down the road from each other, and even just on a Friday night we'd go and sit in the park and chat, and he would just like mentor me, counsel me, and be like, it's going to be okay. And I guess that being geographically close as well, that was really helpful, because I could just call him up and be like, I don't know what I'm doing. So yeah, I think he's been really, really instrumental in supporting like the ongoing, well, my mental health, I guess, really, yeah.
So choose good geographically close, empathetic advice.
Empathetic advisors.
It's great. So imagine, we've got a good question from Tarzan Hu, second story. Imagine the classes you're in high school and you're talking to students. And what would be your in that instance, what would be your top tip for others who want to start an e-commerce online fashion business?
So when you talk about school, like school
just
or
people
uni?
Who are at the start of their journey.
Oh, at the start of their
starting
journey.
a company,
Yeah.
What would you give them? What are the top tips as an e-com
specific?
to where you're at?
Yeah.
In fashion, what would be the top?
Okay. Well, if it's e-com specific, I think the thing that is like absolutely instrumental is you need to understand your performance marketing metrics and how to really create that, drive the conversion. I think there's disconnect between what people see being put out there and actually how much data plays into the success of a business. So you can put out the most beautiful content like that photograph up there, but if you're not driving it to the right channels, the right customers, the right captions, it's not going to convert. So you can put out as many beautiful photos as you want, but if you're not thinking about the performance marketing behind it, it's just going into the ether and no one's going to see it. So I think that is something that that's my knowledge of that has just escalated astronomically over the year. So I think that's the key, because I think sometimes people just think, oh, it's just going to be pretty fashion, e-com, yada yada yada, but it's actually just data, the unsexy bit of it.
And any tips for fashion?
For fashion specifically, there are, and this almost speaks to the first point, like there are so many, the competition's so high and the barriers to entry are so low in terms of just creating an online business now. Like it's easy enough with Shopify and all your plugins, and every man and their dog has a Instagram shop. So I think it's really about understanding your end consumer and really refining in on who your target market is, and delivering on what they want. I think that is the key, and not just making something that you think is cute, like the end consumer needs to want it.
So then, has that played into that low stat on returns?
Yes, I think that is part of it, and also, of course, the low fidelity fit technology, and trying to provide as much information about each garment so that the decision-making process is more considered. Yeah.
So, more advice questions. What advice would you have for any female entrepreneurs at the start of their journey and thinking about switching over from their current day job to being full-time founder?
Yeah,
what did it look like for you?
Yeah, for me, so we were fortunate enough that we did get some seed funding. So my business partner and I were able to be full-time on LükBook and get paid almost like minimum wage, but just enough to live. But now that sort of changed completely in terms of the landscape of the economy that we're in right now. And so what I would say, one of my key learnings in that is to almost have a side hustle to your side hustle. So to set up an assured income stream, even if it's part-time or contracting or whatever it might be, because you never know what the future will hold. And if you've got that semi-security, then at least you can keep working on your main business, which is what I'm having to build out now as well. Yeah. So I think, I think you need to really be clever and sure in terms of how you can look after yourself and fund yourself, and not just quit your jobs like spontaneously. Like that's never going to work. So
make measured moves.
Measured moves.
Yeah. On the screen before you had that you shopped around a safe, but you also had some venture debt. Can you explain the difference between the two and what that process was like?
Yeah, so the venture debt, we don't actually have any venture debt. That's what we're pursuing at the moment for our next round, but we do have safe notes and debt finance. So the safe notes have come through our, equity crowd fund or funding method. So that's just people who have safe notes that there is a certain valuation on the business at that point in time that correlates to a percentage ownership when you do your next funding round. Wow, I don't know if anyone understood that, because I understood it because I know finance, but I don't know if everyone else did. But so that's the safe note, and then the debt finance is a loan that we've been able to secure, and that is probably very uncommon, I think. And it's got very favourable terms on it, but I think that's an anomaly.
Does it always have favourable? That's what I was trying to get
No.
Because it's very, the raising part, the safe part is very social and network based, whereas you're usually dealing with a central entity for debt.
Yes.
So why is it favourable in this instance?
It's favourable because, so debt financing is cheaper across the long term of running a business, because you're just repaying, obviously, the repayments each month, but then also the interest on top, which is not going to be as high as when your equity owners own a part of your business, because the assumption is that your valuation of your business will just grow, and then they're owning part of, a 5, 10, 20, however many $1 million business, as opposed to just repaying your repayments over time. So, but I think that is an anomaly. I don't think that that's normal, and that was somebody that we knew in our network. So I think that we're probably quite privileged to secure that loan finance. Yeah. I don't think a bank would be lending me that.
No,
so.
So it's curious. The next question was, who did you get it from? And that's curious that it's someone you know rather than a bank.
Yeah, so yeah.
So in branching out into a market where women's clothes do not fit the traditional perfect figure, has LükBook made real world impact, and how is your startup making its mark now? Yeah,
so I guess that taps into those two photographs, the one of my business partner and then the group of women, in terms of how we're actually creating that social change. But another example of that, I think, and these are my favourite days in a working day. So we run in-house editorial photo shoots, and that's where we get the garments from all of our designers, and then we can make beautiful outfits across the different designers, and we get the models in, and it's a whole hype day. We've got the tunes playing, the snacks, the whole thing. And whenever we have those shoots, that is when we can really embody the purpose of LükBook, and you can see how women are just so confident in the way that they're presenting themselves and modelling for us. And actually, a specific shoot that I absolutely love, we did our first, not lingerie, but shapewear photo shoot. So I guess that's the most sort of skin showing shoot that we've done. And that was absolutely amazing. We had about 10 models of very different body shapes and sizes, but also culturally diverse models and ability diverse, gender diverse, and just us all in a row. We had the pumping music, and it was just that real community vibe, and everyone felt so comfortable doing that photo shoot. And then I was like, okay, this is why I'm running LükBook. It's not just me sitting as a Grinch behind a laptop, which is not my favourite bit, but it has to be done. Yeah. So I think that's really special.
We're approaching the hour, so it's time to open up to the crowd. Does anyone here today have any questions for Catherine?
Catherine, you are an inspiration. Thank you for this morning. Where do you hope that LükBook will be by the end of 2023? What's your goal for just that 1 year period?
Yeah, I think when we first started LükBook, we had very aggressive targets and probably quite unrealistic. And I think that the year in sort of navigating how this plays out has really helped us to refine our year-on-year goals. And so I think realistically by the end of this year, we would like to have at least done about 6 pop-ups to really understand our customer on the ground. And then ideally by the end of the year have set up a signature store. Yeah.
so insight focused, always focusing on the customer. That's so cool.
You have to.
Siobhan?
My question's around the capital raising and
Yeah.
acknowledging. I mean, you're working in an industry that, or a subsection of the industry that's often not represented very well at all. So that's great to see you doing that. When it comes to financing and speaking to investors, the stats are that female founders are far less likely to secure
It's
funding,
ridiculous.
even though their
Yeah.
return on investment is much, much higher than male-led companies. What's your experience been, or can you share any insights if there have been any at all around, around going to pitch to investors and everyone around the table isn't your target market?
Yeah, I think that, and that's sort of the bottleneck that we're really facing at the moment. One of our key challenges is to get additional funding to grow this thing, and that's why we're almost having to pivot the way in which we operate. But I guess in terms of insight in having conversations with angel investors is a lot more fruitful, and I guess they make the time to understand the problem. Certainly if I'm speaking to a woman, they just get it, even if they're not in a bigger body. But I would say 99% of the meetings that we're having with VC investors, it is just men sitting across the table and not really just not understanding the problem. Of course, I'm just speaking about a collection of people that we've basing this on the evidence that I've have and the experience that I've had. And I think if I was to get $1 for every time somebody said, "Oh, that's a cute little niche," I would be a millionaire. And so I think the way in which we prepare for those meetings is really, you've always got to understand your end audience. So if they are not necessarily going to connect with the emotional side of why it is that we're doing what we're doing, then really speaking to the data, the metrics, the potential in the market, how we can return the money that they've invested and how quickly we can do that. But I think despite even doing that and really the more data-driven sell, it's proving to be quite difficult. So, yeah. And that's probably why you saw the photo of us napping in between meetings with VCs. So it's hard. It's not easy. I think my tip is to really go in with the data as opposed to necessarily the emotional sell, which is also, I guess, contradictory to how we're taught to sell our business, because more often than not, people who are investing in startups are connected to the purpose and the mission and the vision behind why it is that you're doing what you're doing, but it's just not landing. Yeah.
Definitely needs to change.
Yeah.
Just wondering if you thought, given the announcement of the new Australian of the Year, whether there's a way that you could leverage the increased visibility of that kind of messaging.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are planning to reach out and try and see if there's some sort of collaboration that we could do or ambassadorship. But I think that, that speaks to the broader conversation as well, is that I think now is a really good time to be starting a business like LükBook, because there is such an uproar in women just being absolutely frustrated. And it, of course, my algorithm is geared in a certain way now because this is all the media that I consume, but it's the people that I do follow, it's constant. And even just the conversations that I'm having with women, it's I just want to be able to go to a shop and buy clothes that make me feel hot and I can turn up in the world and just get on with it. I think that that's definitely something that's on our minds. Yeah.
Yeah. What was the minimum viable product that you secured the grant for, and how difficult was it to secure it, and also how was that funding then received?
Sure. So the product that we applied to use the funds for was to build out the low fidelity version of our FitTech.
KVFit?
Yeah. So And I guess that it is simple, but it's just the hours that it takes to get somebody to build that out. So that was that. And in terms of the process of how that played out, something that I've come to learn through running LükBook is how accessible people might be if you're slightly pushy and just be like, I want to talk to you now. So I didn't really appreciate that you can actually speak to the grant providers in National Gov, I don't know. So we just reached out to them and we essentially drafted our first MVP application, and then we sent it to them, said, can we have a meeting and can you give us feedback in terms of how we can refine what it is that we're sending to you, exactly making sure that they are getting exactly what they want and how they want it. Because they are wanting to give out this money, and you just have to make sure that you're meeting all the criteria. So reaching out to them, getting the feedback, embedding that feedback, putting in the application, and I think that was like so valuable. And then in terms of receiving the funds, it was in 2 milestones. So the first one, and then we had to do a progress report. And then in order to receive the final funding, you had to essentially have been able to build out the thing and walk the representative through what it is that you've done to prove that you've actually done it, and then the final milestone comes through.
That's great advice too for anyone who's looking to submit a grant. You can talk to the people who are administering it, they can give feedback, and the New South Wales government has revamped the MVP grant process.
Yeah, massively, yeah. So I would definitely look at it now.
I have a question on the data, on the fit. Have you thought about using like customers' pre-existing purchase and go like send them like a question out like, did this fit well? And then use that data point to essentially match different designs? Because I'm assuming
yes. Yeah, that is something that we're looking at, because that, I guess, is a really easy way to know whether or not that particular fitting of that garment is going to fit the end consumer, and then building out the profile of that customer, and then using that to facilitate snowflake marketing. So directly saying, these are the garments across these designers in your size that are going to fit you. So yeah, I guess that's less accurate, but better than nothing way of collecting that data. Yeah, totally.
Nearing the end, one more question, yeah?
Yeah, one more question, thank you. I just asked you if you have ever considered to use the online kind of influencers stimulate the sales and increase the offline purchase. Because recently I and my PhD student, we research on the field, we published a ranking journal, so we researched over 300 firms like you, and then we find out that they use online influencer, have that direct interaction with customers, and that increase the brand, also boost the sales. The other method, I think this is one of the possible way to boost the brand image and increase the customer connections. The other way is to use a large digital like a company as a platform. So I would recommend you to use Shein. They have a massive customer and one of the top sales in Australia, very easy to access because you have a very unique product. And I think the platform collaboration will stimulate the sales. Yeah.
Totally.
And they have small face and very easy to operate. And you can boost your brand and use your models, use your connections with consumer, and then you will have attract large consumers.
Yeah, I think that is definitely worth having a lengthier conversation afterwards about. But I think that, yeah, certainly like leveraging the existing architecture of other sites would be totally beneficial. So I guess what you're saying there is rather going down like an M&A path to almost be acquired and then operate within an existing architecture to scale quickly, which is actually something that we're talking about as an option as well. So yeah, I think that that's great, yeah.
All right, that wraps up Startup Stories. Thank you again, Catherine. To start the year with such an inspirational story has been really, really cool. And we're so lucky to have Catherine as a member at our hub on level 3. You good? Yep. we actually have James Steadman, who's in the crowd with us this morning. He's the co-founder of Heart & Health. He's an alumni of our Accelerator program from last year, and he's a member of the Hub as well. And he'll be sharing his inspiring story for Startup Stories in March. So please join us for that. Join the Dots will be happening at the last Thursday of this month. We'll announce that next week. We'll get that out next week. So definitely come along to that if anyone wants to see who's who in the zoo and learn a bit about a particular industry. That's definitely one for you. And that is it for Startup Stories. So thank you again. If anyone wants a tour of the building, if anyone wants to chat, hang around and learn a bit about what we're doing or what Catherine's doing, definitely do. We'll be here for a little while. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning.